Well, good day, y'all. This is Patrick at Qdabra Software, and I want to thank you for joining us once again for our weekly webinar. Today we're talking about qRules, and we're happy to announce that we just made that available on our website. To get us started, I have a quick poll for folks, and just quickly wanted to ask you a question, and we'll just quickly get your feedback here, and then the show will be on the road here. So we're just going to wait a few seconds here. It looks like we've got a lot of people on the call that are using qRules, and a few people that are interested in trying it out. That's great. Thank you very much for that quick feedback. So today we're going to talk about what qRules is, why you care, what the top no-code features are. We've got new commands in 6.1. We're at qRules is pretty mature at this point. We've got over 150 commands in it. So there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of stuff that many of you may not know about. In fact, even myself, being the presenter here and the guy who's pitching qRules a lot, we have so many commands in qRules now. It's hard for me to keep track of them all, and I'll be going through some of them, giving you kind of an idea. And then we have demos, and we have a special promotion at the end as well. And we'll have a quick survey. So I want to thank you for joining us. This is being recorded. And if you've got questions, feel free to type them in any time. So just a quick recap. We started InfoPath Dev back in 2004. InfoPathDev.com is your source, your free forum on the web for InfoPath questions. And if we go to InfoPath Dev quickly, everyone is familiar with this site. It's probably on the call. But if you aren't, here it is. This is the #1 site for getting your questions answered, your InfoPath questions answered. And so we have a forum on here, we have a blog, and we have received lots and lots of questions over the years. So back in 2004, we launched InfoPath Dev, and we started helping people answering questions that people had about InfoPath. And about 2005, we realized that the same questions were getting asked over and over again, and we're getting kind of tired of answering these questions, the common gaps in InfoPath. I want to map my repeating data to a list. I want to upload my attachment or my image to a library and replace with a link, and so on. We kept on getting these same questions, and so we thought to ourselves, well, maybe what we should do is create a common library that we can share with the community, and at the same time help fund the InfoPath Dev site, which is free, right? So we spend money every month to answer questions and to stand up the server, and so we wanted to have some way to try to reduce the cost of that and help people out, and that's where qRules came from. qRules, unlike, instead of having to write your own extension library for InfoPath, we've given you a common library with many of the most frequently used commands, requests for commands out there. So why is common good? Well, common library is good because you can reuse it. You don't have to create one extension library for one form, your invoice request form or your expense report form or something, and then create a separate one for another form. Out of box, InfoPath has this wonderful support for programming. .NET, C#, back in 2003, you could even write JavaScript. And the problem is people end up writing code. People who are developers will write code, and they'll hard code it to that form template, which means that that code cannot be reused in another form template. And the way they do that is they refer to the individual field in the form in the code. Well, what happens when the data source changes? What happens when you've got a different form template? Can't use that code. So what we did, and I think the big kind of epiphany here, it's not that big a deal, but was to say, well, look, let's make it agnostic so it can work with any form that you have, any form template. And the reason it does that, it's able to do that, is it doesn't hard code any data source references into the DLL, into the code that's behind it. And secondly, you don't have to worry about the code because we've written it for you. So you just inject it into your form. You can access the commands via rules, just like you do today with other things. And whenever we have an upgrade, such as 6.1, you just re-inject the qRules into it, and it works just fine. You get the new commands. All is great. works in the browser. There are a couple caveats. If you're running 2007 browser, you have to admin deploy because there wasn't a sandbox. 2010, 2013 had the sandbox. By default, the sandbox is enabled. So for example, 365 works just fine if you're a site collection admin. Some companies will turn off the sandbox, and that is a setting. Many of you are familiar with it. They just have to turn it back on. It is a security best practice because the sandbox prevents rogue applications from getting access. So it allows you to push out forms with code behind, and those forms then are secure. So otherwise, you have to admin deploy, and that's not as secure because the forms have access to the process that's running, and they're not firewalled in a sense. They're not in separate sandboxes. So top commands in qRules today, and I kind of did a quick survey with our InfoPath MVPs here. Asked Jimmy and Hillary and Greg, what they thought the top commands were, and SubmitToSharePointList comes back time and time again. This is the command that allows you to map that repeating data from your forms into lists. We can also refresh the data using RefreshSharePointList command, so it can round trip. It can be bidirectional. The mapping tool, which I'm going to show in a minute, makes this very easy to do. Actually, let me show it right now. So this is the new mapping tool in 6.1, and you'll notice the UI has changed quite a bit. We're actually pushing this tool as one of the migration paths for InfoPath. If you want to convert to like Mintex forms or SharePoint list forms, you can use this tool to map all of your existing InfoPath forms into SharePoint lists. And here I've created a simple form. This is actually kind of a silly form. Let me show you what the form looks like. It's not a good practice form. It's for testing, really. And if I had more time, I would have used the expense report or something. So this is the silly test form, and you can see that we didn't even bother to correctly name the data source on the right. Just totally bad practice here. Don't do this at home. But the idea is that we have a repeating group underneath the parent group, and we want to actually map that data to separate SharePoint lists. Now, to create the mapping, we have this tool called the SharePoint List Mapping Tool, and it has two tabs. The Define Mapping tab, which allows us to create that mapping. So you can see here I've typed in my SharePoint site, and I get my SharePoint lists, and then I can go down here and I can define my mappings. And you can see in 6.1 we have the hierarchical mapping support. So I can define my parent, and I can define my child, and then I can specify which list they're going to. So the parent list is going to be, I guess there's no parent list here in this definition, or there is. It's called parent list, and then the child list. So if we go back to the site, let's see here. Here's the child list, and we should have a parent list as well. So let's go to Site Contents, Parent List. You can see I've got 3 items in it. So when I actually go to this this form and fill it out, so here's the form in the browser. Obviously not the greatest form, and I apologize for the silliness here. Silly me. Okay, and the date is today. We're just going to fill out this form, and we're going to add a couple child items. And we'll say Yahoo, and we'll say Bingo, and we'll submit. And what this form is doing is when we hit the submit command, it's submitting the form, it's giving it a unique ID. I'll talk more about that unique ID in a second. And it's actually mapping then that data to the child list. You can see the Yahoo and the Bingo got submitted just fine. And the parent list is silly me. So I can go, and it's got the references all set up, and so it just works just wonderfully. It's very easy to do. Now, how do we do that? Well, in the form, I got to get my form correctly open here. This submit button is actually accessing the qRules command, submit to SharePoint list. And you can see here rule 1, which once again, not the best practice. We should have named this correctly, but it's a test form once again. So the rule 1 is calling that command, submit to SharePoint list with the mapping and using the submit data connection. Now, the submit data connection, you have to define that using your data connections here. And you can see we've defined that. And this is all in the documentation, but you just map that to the list.asmx service running. and then you run the command. If the command is successful, you'll see it shows up here in this debug section down below. And here you can see qRules actually keeps, in 6.1, it keeps an execution history. So you can actually just drag this repeating history into your form to get all of the history of the commands. That's great for debugging purposes. Makes it a lot easier. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just submitting it using that command to those lists, and then we just submit the form itself to the library. We're also actually creating a unique ID, and I believe we're doing that on load. We have a rule that so it's refreshing the list items as well. So it works both ways. Let me actually test this. And then there's the second rule here, which is actually generating the unique ID. So if we open the form again, let's go back into our list and let's change bingo to, let's see here, I want to edit the item and I want to edit the name to bingo Zingo. And we'll save it. And let's just see if this works. Because it is bidirectional. So if we go back to our, where did I go? I want to go to my SharePoint list. Site contents, and it's the submit to SharePoint list. This is it right here. And if I open up the one I just submitted, it should refresh it. This is the wrong one. It should refresh the items and get the Zingo. So you can see there it's bidirectional. So that's the cool thing about those two commands, submit to SharePoint list and refresh list items. And that is probably the most popular command in qRules today. We also have save to SharePoint. Now save to SharePoint is probably second most popular. It allows us to upload images or file attachments to a library and replace it with a link. It's very easy to use. And I may demo this in a second. I want to get through the deck though. We have copy table and set value. Very, very important commands when you're copying data from an external secondary data connection into your main data source. And we also use insert sometimes because if you have a specific schema, a specific table structure when you're pulling from and you don't want to use that table structure in your main data source, then we recommend using insert. Insert actually is interesting because insert actually just inserts rows into a table, but when you insert those rows, you can then use a rule to copy the values from the secondary data source into that specific row. And that actually is very powerful because it doesn't require the data source schemas to match like copy table does. Actually, copy table, the more recent versions of copy table are a little more flexible and they allow you to specify different schemas. Set value, also a very important command because it allows us to set a value in a table specific to that row number. So that's a very, very powerful, very highly used command. Along with insert, you get delete, so you can programmatically add or remove rows from a repeating section or table. Date diff command, also very popular, allows you to calculate the difference between two dates, excluding holidays and weekends. So those are top commands. We also have some very powerful commands. I showed generate GUID. That's a very simple command. In fact, when you're creating a qRules form, let me just show you a sample form here. We'll just create a form from scratch. So we'll just go into the designer and say, hey, I want a sample browser form, and we'll call this my qRules sample, and we'll just say this form out. It's the simplest form ever. It doesn't really have anything in it except for one field. We're going to add one field called ID. And then we'll save this form out, and we'll show you how easy it is to inject qRules. So I'm just going to call this qRules sample. So there's my form. I've just saved it. Now, when you inject a form with qRules, you have to install qRules. Very easy to do from our website. And then you run the injector. And then you point the injector at the form that you want to inject. And it runs. It detects automatically what version your form is, 2010, browser, sandbox, all that stuff. And we injected the form, and then what we do is we reopen it. So we just reopen our form using InfoPath Designer. And we know we have qRules because on the right, the field's data source, we have that secondary data source now. So what we'll do is we're going to add a button that calls the command to generate the GUID. So button, and then we have a rule on the button, and the rule is going to do what? The rule is going to set the field's value for qRules. This is how we access qRules. We set the command value, and in this case we just want to generate the GUID. Now the generate GUID command has a whole bunch of parameters. I'll show those in a second. Let's see, I didn't want this here. I don't know how I got that added. Okay, so once we call that generate GUID, and we want to add another action to set the ID of the form equal to that generated value, and that's just going to be the value, the result from the command. So there we go, and we'll drag that into our view so we can see it, and we'll preview. And there we go. So that's the very simplest qRules command that you could possibly run. Every time we hit it, we're going to be generating a different GUID. This is useful if you need a unique ID for your form and you don't want to use a natural key. Sometimes you want to obfuscate the form identity by using a long, unique identifier. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's like this is too hard for people to remember, so you don't want to use a GUID. You want to use a natural key, your name plus the date, for example. But in this case, we're using an obfuscated ID for that form ID. And that's useful when you're mapping your forms to a database or doing something that doesn't require humans to remember the number. So that's how simple it is to add qRules to your form and use it. Let's take a quick look at some of the commands in qRules. So there's the generate GUID command. That's on page 60. So this is our 67-page manual coming out here. And by the way, qRules is available today. If you go to our Qdabra home site, you'll see down at the bottom, Qdabra releases qRules 6.1. You just click on that, and you can get the overview of what's new in 6.1, 2 new commands. I'll show you these commands in a second. We've updated some commands. You can read the details. We've got better support, better functionality. We have this new cool mapping tool that allows you to do hierarchical parent-child relationships. We've made some bug fixes and so on. So you can read up on it. You can just download it by clicking free trial. You don't need to purchase anything, and you can install it and start using it today. So some of the commands, we've got over 150 commands now in qRules. So we've got commands that allow you to connect to SQL, encrypt your data. We've got commands that allow you to encode your data as basically create an image on the fly. Lots of math functions for people who want to do special financial calculations. We've got random number generations. You can filter a list. You can format the date. This is very powerful if you want to use milliseconds to format your unique ID. For example, date, time, milliseconds will give you more uniqueness if you're using a natural key to prevent overwrites when you have 2 people submitting at the same time. We can convert time zone. I mean, there's just so many commands. It's just mind-boggling these days. But you can see some of them here. Lots of different commands for you to use. And most of our forms will use between 5 and 10 commands, depending on what the form's doing. We have commands that detect whether the form is opened in mobile or not, whether the form has changed, whether it's new, whether it's read-only. You can switch the view on open. You can set the default view. You can change the focus of where the cursor is. You can render the form in, gosh, I don't even know what render form does anymore. Let me just check. So you got this command comes, this qRules command comes with the download. So if you want to check to see what a command does, just look at it. It says here, oh, okay, so this generates an HTML rendering for the form's view. So one of the new cool commands we have today is actually ExportView. So let me show you that command. And this is another sample test form, and I'm just going to preview it. A lot of times what you want to do is you have a nice form and you want to export as HTML. Well, if you're using the out-of-box export PDF options, the problem is that InfoPath doesn't use a nice PDF generator. So let me just put in my correct address here. Okay, so if I generate export as PDF, it's going to export the form as a PDF. And with any luck here, did it work? It says it worked. Oh, it didn't use, I should have had a slash here. Sorry, my bad. So you can see that history is now showing us it worked, but it used the wrong name here. So in the folder I have above this one, I probably have a badly named PDF. Second time I actually put the slash in, so it's exporting the PDF. Now, why do I show the PDF first? Well, to show you that the format for the PDF isn't super cool. You can see that this does not look so good. It's got a weird margin on it. This is using the out-of-box Office XPS utility to generate a PDF. If you're generating a PDF for your form, what I recommend doing is just printing it and using QtPDF. Let me just show you what, because it does a better job of making your form look good. In fact, it looks tremendously better. And this is a simple free version that you can do here. You don't need to worry about buying anything. Let's just see if we can stuff it back in that same location. I don't like this dialog a whole lot, but let's see here if we can find where we want to be. Okay, so we're going to call this my form 2 PDF or something like that. If I can get my mouse to work correctly here. My form 2 PDF. Now when we do that, you'll see that this actually looks a lot better. Doesn't that look good? I mean, that's the way it should look. And unfortunately, the out-of-box PDF functionality in InfoPath doesn't give you that. However, if you export it as MHT, and there's the MHT, it does look really good. So let's look at this version. Okay, that's perfect, right? And you can use that MHT to generate a PDF. We have a web service now running in 365 that will generate a PDF from that MHT. And the nice thing about this command is it exports the current view. So if you've got a form and you can switch the view and then export it and then have it run the PDF generation on the web service. So that's the new command, export view. And once again, if you have questions, feel free to just throw them in the question. Looks like we already do have a few questions. And I'm just going to take a quick look at this. Dick, you had a question, what is meant by IP? Publisher must be SC admin, site collection admin. So what that means is that if you're publishing a browser-based form to SharePoint and you're running 2010 or 2013, you need to be a site collection admin to include, to access the sandbox and publish a form that has code in it, which is qRules, right? Greg, you've got a question. Do you have any rules or ways to drag and drop attachments into IP? Yes, I'm glad you asked that. We do have a command. We do actually have a control out there that allows you to drag and drop in the filler these. You can drag and drop attachments into your form, and I believe, well, I don't see it here in our list of tools and template parts, but we do have a tool that allows you to do that. And we actually did a webinar on this about a year ago. And I don't have a quick demo for you. I might, maybe at the end. So Greg, you should send me email, and I'll show you a quick demo on that. Because we do have a really cool demo that shows how to drag and drop items into a form. It has to be a filler form. It doesn't work in the browser, but it's pretty slick. Josh, you've got a question. If I understand this correctly and want to update the injected rules, you just from 5.2 to 6.1, you just re-inject. Correct. So, and I just did this morning because I had a form ER 2010 XSN that had an old version of qRules, and all I did was I just went in qRules injector, and then you just point it at that old form that you have and just inject it with a new one, and it will, in this case, it will tell you it's the same version. Okay, the file's open. So in order to inject it, you have to close the designer. Let's try it again here. And it will complain that, oh, it's the same version, right? But you can force override and say, I don't care, I want to upgrade it again. But in your case, it won't complain because it is a different version. Yeah, and we really appreciate you being a user of qRules. Greg, any commands to get username? Yes, username is one of the commands in qRules. In fact, if you go to the bottom of the guide here, you'll see that get username is there. Get username was very important because there's get user profile name, and then I think that's the one you want. We demoed this in a webinar last summer. Actually, I've demoed this a couple times since 365 became more important. Getting the username in 365 browser forms, obviously you can use the username function, but it doesn't give you the right information. It doesn't give you the email address. So if you want to get the email address of the user in 365, you have to use this command. Works just fine, and that's there for you, and it works in the browser. Yep. And then Bruce, you've got a question. Is there a method to publish web-based qRules from SharePoint 2013 with Sandbox disabled? Well, yes, there is. You could be an admin, and you could do an admin deploy. But like I said, that's not a security best practice. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. We're going to wrap up here in a minute or two. I've got one more demo to show you. But just keep in mind, there are lots of commands. There are some commands that are super powerful, and you can read all about them in our guide. And we have lots and lots of how-to tutorials. In 6.1, like I said, we have this new mapping tool. And the beauty of the mapping tool is, once again, that if you're like in this mode where I want to move my forms, let's see if I can find the mapping tool again. You want to import you define the mapping, and then you can actually take and you can import a whole bunch of forms from a library, and you can just blast them in to the lists that you defined. And here you can see that we've just mapped the field name on the left to the SharePoint list, child list, and we have some specification here to map it to make sure the parent list ID is respected. There's a lookup column here for parent list ID. So there is a little bit of getting used to this, but it's a pretty nice new UI. We're very happy with it. And if you want to choose a different field, you just choose it from the drop downs over here, and you can just select. This is the bad schema that I showed earlier. You just select the field that you want to map, double click it, and then you specify the column that you want to map it to. So it's really that simple. Then you can export, you can save the mapping file, use it with that command, or like I said, you can batch map all of your existing forms over using that import forms tab. And then when you click import, it literally will go out, take all of those XML files in that folder and blast them through that mapping to those child lists. So if you have 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 forms that you want to automatically convert to a bunch of lists, you can do that using this tool. So very powerful. Let's finish up here. I want to show you one more command, the Export SharePoint folder. This is a new command that we added in 6.1. And here's the simple library, the simple form. Once again, a silly test form that doesn't look very good at all. If I go back to the site, let's see if I get the right site here. I think this is it. So I've got these 3 folders here, and this is just a folder. So let's say, for example, if I go into the yo-yo folder, you see I don't have any subfolders, right? So if I open my form, I said, look, I want to actually create some folders here. I can actually type in yo-yo, and I want the folder name to be ma. Create. Error. Okay, so this is what happens when you have an error in qRules. It'll tell you what it is. And in this case, I can't see it. So what you do is you go into the form in the designer, and you expand this field so you can read it, and maybe make it wrap so that you can actually display it correctly. I guess it is going to wrap here. Okay, let's try this one more time. Yeah, and I think the issue was that I had the thing wrong. So CreateSharePointFolder is what I want here. And underneath that, I've got yo-yo. Well, We'll try this. I don't think that's right either, but let's just try it. All right, so you're going to get an error here. It's going to tell you, look, you did it wrong. You need to read the manual, dude. And you can see it gives you a stack trace as well. But the error is usually at the top here. And in this case, it's not very descriptive, but it's saying that there's an exception. So the data connection is not working. So I've obviously botched this. But to make this simpler here, the library folder should be CreateSharePointFolder. So let's just fix this real quick, just to show you that this is, of course, a demo. If I just say I want to create Hello World, this one we should have more success with. There we go, success. And if I go back and refresh, you'll see that it created that SharePoint folder called Hello World. So you can use this command to create folders, and that's useful because sometimes what you want to do is you want to save your attachments in separate folders. So you can create the folder, and then you can use the SaveToSharePoint command to save those attachments and those images to that specific folder. So anyway, that's some quick demos for you. Any questions? I've answered a few already. Looks like we have no more questions, but if you've got questions, I'm still here. We post all of these webinars on our YouTube channel, Qdabra. It should be up there in a couple hours. And we do have a quick survey at the end with some quick questions. We have our new Forms Quote site. We're trying to provide leadership and I guess stewardship, or we're your advocates in the form space. InfoPath is still the best form technology out there today because it's got XML. It's got a great UI. It's got support for HTML tables. It's got offline. It's got XML. It's document format. And you can run rich rules and validation without code. And sometimes you need to extend that form, and that's where qRules comes in. But we're here to help, essentially help you navigate the future, your form's future, as technology changes, and that's what Forms Quote is all about. We have a special promo today just for you, today only. If you're already a qRules customer, which it looks like about 88% of you are, if you send me 2 or 3 sentences describing your cool scenario and why qRules helps you, we'll give you a free 1-year renewal. And that's usually at $350. Now, your forms, once they're injected with qRules, they work forever. So this is a renewal for the injector, so you can use it again and again with new forms over the next year. If you've already renewed, we'll give you another year. So don't delay. If you want to get this deal, you need to send email to me or webinars@qdabra.com and say, hey, qRules promo. I love qRules because I'm using SubmitToSharePointList command and it helps me get my work done and I am happy, or I'm not happy, whatever. But we'll give you a free 1-year renewal, and we really appreciate you as customers. That's it for my webinar today. If you've got questions, I'm more than happy to do another demo. It looks like, Greg, you had a demo request for, I think it was you, Greg. You were asking about the drag and drop thing. I might be able to find that if you're still interested. Actually, let's take that one offline. I don't want to hold up everyone here.